Hello guys, welcome to video number 2. The first stitch we are going to learn is going to be the single crochet stitch, and we're just going to be making a simple square. Nothing too fancy. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a slip knot. And then we're going to make a chain of 20. If you have not watched video number 1, I'm going to put a link to video number 1 right there. Watch that, and then you can come back to video number 2. And while you're making your 20 chains, you want to make them loose, because that's going to make it easier for you when you start working into each chain when we go back in the other direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, so now we have our chain of 20 stitches, or 20 chains. And whenever you see a pattern that calls for single crochet, you're going to see something that says chain 20 plus 1, or make 21 chains and then single crochet into the second chain from the hook. Well, the reason why that extra chain is there, I'm going to draw this for you real quick. Let's just say you have a chain of 5 chains. We're going to be going in this direction on the way back. And the height of a single crochet, let's just say that's our height of the single crochet. That extra chain, that's going to bring you up to the height of the top of the single crochet in the next row, because you have to start up here, work down into this stitch, and then finish your single crochet up to this height. So that's why if you see in patterns, there's always that extra chain. That chain is to bring you up to the height of the next row of single crochets. So we have a chain of 20, so I'm going to add that extra chain. That's going to bring me up to the height of the next row, so I'm not going to work into that chain. In other stitches, that extra chains on the end would count as a stitch. Single crochet, that extra chain does not count as a stitch. We'll explain that more when we get to the half double crochet. Now if you turn your chain over, you're going to see all these little bumps. You see those? They kind of look like the back of an alligator. That's where you're going to be putting your stitches. So this bump right here, that's the additional chain that we added at the end. So we're not going to be working into that, because that's just bringing us up to the height of the next row. We're going to go into this bump right here. This is going to be a little bit tricky. Working in a chain is never fun. No matter how long you crochet, this is probably the most difficult part of crochet, is building off of your foundation chain. I'm going to show you this 2 or 3 times so you don't have to pause, go back and put everything down and pick it back up. So this is the stitch we're going to go into right here, into the back bump. So hold in the crochet hook like a knife, pinch in my loop right there. I'm going to take the hook, I'm going to go under that loop right there. So now we have 2 loops on the hook. So now we have to make another loop on the hook and pull that loop through this loop to start the single crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, and the same concept of turning the hook down also applies here. So if you turn down, it goes through much easier. So now I just went through that chain, the back bump, pulled another loop up, and that gave me 2 loops on my hook. Now to complete the single crochet, I'm going to yarn over again. Now I have 3 loops on my hook again, and I'm going to pull this loop through both of these loops, and that is how you finish off a single crochet. I'm going to do this slow, turn the hook down, and it goes right through. Now the reason this is a size I, or a 5.5 millimeter hook, is because of this part of the hook right here. The diameter, or the thickness of this hook, is 5.5 millimeters, or a US size I. So after you do that, you want to make sure you slide the loop down onto this part of the hook, because that's what's controlling the size of your stitches. This part of the hook right here. Alright, that's the trickiest part, is going off of your chain into that first bump. So I'm going to do that with you again. Right now it's stretched out because I just worked into it. So single crochet, you're going to go into that back bump, yarn over, pull a loop through it, leaving 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over again, and you're going to pull this loop through both of these loops, and that will complete your first single crochet. Then we have to find our next stitch. You see how this is kind of stretched out right here? Which means we already worked that chain or that stitch. So we know we need to go to this one right here. So we're going to take the hook, go into that back bump, then we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop. Now we have 2 loops on the hook, and we're going to yarn over, and we're going to pull through both of these with this loop. And again, turn the hook down as you go through. It makes it much easier. Whoops. Sorry, I'm looking through my camera screen right now, so it's a little funny. And now you have 2 single crochets. Now if you look, you can kind of see how high the tops of these stitches are off of the foundation chain. So that's why when we were here, we had to do that chain to bring us to that height, because we've more than doubled the height of our project so far. And we're just going to keep working all the way to the end. Go into that back bump loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. You have 2 on the hook, yarn over, pull through both of them. As you hold your chain out, you can kind of see where your next little bump is, so that's where we're going to go. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Now you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both of those. And now how you can see that that little chain that we had, it's now starting to become about the width of my finger. And the reason we went into the back bump, if you turn the thing upside down, that's what gives you the nice braided bottom, where if you didn't do that, the bottom would look funky and you'd have to go back over it again to get that nice finished edge. So we're kind of starting off with a nice finished edge right off the beginning. So holding it out like this, there's our next bump. I'm sorry it's hard to see on camera. And this is why it's important to not have a fuzzy yarn, because you need to be able to see the distinguishing things in your stitches very clearly, especially when you're first beginning. So I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Then we go to our next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. There's our next little bump right there. Put the hook in, yarn over, pull up 1 loop, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both of them. There's our next bump right there. Put the hook in, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. We worked that chain already. There's our next bump right there. Hook goes in, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And then this is the beginning stages of our little square that we're going to be making. So if you need to pause this and go back, you can do that. I will meet you up when I get near the end, so I can show you how you can figure out what your last stitch is, so you don't actually forget a stitch or add a stitch. Because if you forget a stitch, your project's going to start getting narrower and narrower. And if you start adding a stitch, your project's going to start getting wider and wider. I'm going to pause the video, and I'll meet you up when I have just a couple more chains, and I'll show you how to make sure you don't add or subtract a stitch, plus turn to go in the opposite direction. Okay, so I'm near the end. I have 3 stitches left, and I can tell because I have my tail, and right where the tail and the slip knot meet, I can see I have 3 of those bumps, so I know I have 3 more stitches. If you take your time and you look closely, it's not really that hard to figure out. But where most people lose and add stitches is working off of the foundation chain, because it's so finicky. So let's finish these last 3 up. Go into that back bump, pull a loop through that chain, leaving 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both of them. That's a single crochet. Yarn over, pull up a loop, 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through both, and there is our last chain. Yarn over, pull up a loop through that chain, leaving 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through both of those. Now, before we go any further, because working off of the chain is the most tricky part of crochet when you're first beginning, and probably every time you crochet, this is where we're going to count our stitches to make sure that we didn't miss any or we didn't add any. And how we're going to do that, if you need to put your project down, you can just pull through and make that loop bigger. This way, like, it doesn't pull out on you. So here is our project, and we're going to turn it towards you. And we're going to see all these little braids. And we're basically just going to count those. So this is that chain that we used to bring us up to the height. So we're not going to count this. We're going to start here. Get that to focus. These two strands kind of make a V, and those are what we're going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we still have 20 stitches. If you didn't come up with 20, count again just to be sure. Somewhere you missed a chain, or if you had more, you went into the same chain twice. But for right now, we're just going to start the next row. Alright, so anytime you start the next row, you're basically just going to turn your project over. Now, make sure where your loop is, where your hook is, that you're working in this direction. I've had people do this and start working on the bottom, which made this side look all funny. So make sure you get an idea of where the top is, and make sure you're working in this direction on the top, that you don't actually start working across the bottom. When you get further along, you won't make that mistake, but when you're new, some people make that mistake because the project is still so small. So just something to double check before you continue. Alright, so we just went in this direction. So let's just say we have single crochets all the way here. So now we need to start working back in this direction, but we're going to flip the project so we're actually working in the same direction the whole time. But again, the next row of single crochets, this is the height right here. So we have to do a chain again to bring us up to the height of that single crochet. Alright, so now that we've turned our work and we're heading in the opposite direction, let's do that chain 1 to bring us up to the height of the next row. So this is not where we're going to be working, because that was our chain 1 to bring us up to the height of the next row. So this is where we're going to be working. And if you kind of turn it towards you, you'll see that V right there. That's where we're going to put our first stitch. So you're going to put the hook behind both of those V's, because that is a full complete stitch versus in the last row where you just had one loop to go through because that was a chain. Now we have 2 because it's a full completed stitch. So you're going to yarn over, pull through that stitch. Now you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and you're going to pull through both of those. So as you can see, like, there's a little hole right here. That was the first stitch that we just worked. And now there's another little hole right here. If we turn it over, we see those 2 strands that make a V. That's going to be our next stitch. Come into focus. There you go. So you're going to take your hook. You're going to go into that next stitch, making sure you grab both strands of the stitch. Yarn over, pull a loop through that stitch. Now you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both of those, and that's what completes your single crochet. And we're just going to keep doing that. go in, make sure you get under both of those strands of the stitch and pull a loop through it. Again, turning the needle down helps it go through easier. Leave in 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both of those. So that little hole, that little gap right there, we finished that stitch. Our next little V is right there. The hook goes in there. Underneath both of these, if I separate it, you can see that that's 2 strands of yarn. You want to make sure you get under both of those. And then you're going to pull a loop through both of those. Again, turning the hook down helps it go through easier. Now we have 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through both of those. If you stretch it out, that's how you can help identify. Because if you pull up on your hook and the yarn, you can see, okay, I've just worked into that stitch. So now my next stitch is right here. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And you're going to keep doing this all the way to the end. And I'm going to show you how to turn this corner and go back in the opposite direction. And make sure you don't add a stitch, because here it gets a little bit trickier because we have that extra chain that we want to make sure we don't work into. So I will meet you back at the end when there's 3 stitches left, and I'll show you how to finish off this row and start the next. Okay, so here's where I have 3 stitches left, and you may accidentally think that you have 4 because of this little guy right here. But this guy does not count as a stitch. That was just our chain 1 that brought us up to this height in the row 2 rows previous. Pull up a loop, pull through 2. Pull through 2. And here's where it really looks a little funny, where you think, oh, I've got 2 more stitches, but nope, you only have 1 stitch left, because this, we're not working into this. Right here, this is going to be our last stitch of the row, right here. Again, making sure you're grabbing both strands of each stitch. Pull a loop through the stitch. Now you have 2 on your hook, yarn over, pull through both. And you have just completed 2 rows of single crochet. So now that we identified what our last stitch was, we are ready to turn our work and go back in the opposite direction. So now that we turned our work, again, we have to chain 1 to bring us up to the height of the next row. But that chain right there, we're not working into that because that's not a stitch. That's just our chain. So moving over, right here is our first stitch. There's that little V stitch. That's where we're going, right there. Again, grabbing both strands. I'm going to pull 1 loop through that stitch, which gives me 2 loops on my hook. To complete the single crochet, yarn over, pull through both of them. Here's our next stitch right here. Pull up a loop and get some more yarn. Yarn over, pull through both of them. Here's our next stitch right here. pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both. And you're just going to keep going back and forth until you have 25 rows. So you're just going to keep going back and forth until you have 25 rows. A good start and reference when you want to make a square that's not a granny square. I'll show you granny squares later. If you have 20 stitches going across, 24 or 25 rows up will square you out, because the height of the stitches is not equal to the width of the stitches when it comes to single crochet. So if you're like, okay, I have 20 stitches and I go up 20 rows, I should have a square. Well, it's not going to work like that. So I'm going to do 25 rows, and I will meet you up when you have 25 rows, and I will show you how to finish this project, tie off, and sew in your ends. Okay, so I didn't actually do 25 rows, but for practice and getting the muscle memory, you should have done 25 rows, and you should have something that looks similar to this. May not be even. If you started to go wider or skinnier, somewhere you missed a stitch or added a stitch. But right now, we're just getting muscle memory, adding stitches and subtracting stitches. That's a very common mistake, and you will get better at not doing that as you practice. So let's just say that I have 25 rows. I'm now at my last stitch. Pull up a loop, pull through 2. Now remember before when we were able to just pull everything out? See if I could pull this whole project out right now. So we need to stop this from being able to do that. And as long as we have loops going through loops, that's always going to be a problem. So how we stop that and finish the project, take your scissors, I'm just going to rip it. So now I've cut off from my skein of yarn. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to pull through the loop on my hook. But I'm not going to leave a loop on my hook. I'm just going to keep pulling until the strand of yarn where I cut off from the skein is completely out, and then you're just going to pull tight. And you have fastened off, and it's nice and tight. And this, you can't pull it out. It's not going to come out. But nobody wants this, so now we have to sew this into our project. This is where the tapestry or the yarn needle comes in handy. Alright. So feed the yarn through your yarn needle. And to make sure that this tail is not going to pull out on us, we are going to go in 3 different directions as we weave it through our stitches, because this is just never going to pull in 3 different directions at the same time. So you just take your needle and you start working through your strands of yarn. and then just pull it all the way through. Once you get the hook all the way through, grab the yarn itself. Don't pull with the needle anymore, just pull the yarn. When you do this, you want to maintain the integrity of the corner that you have, so you don't want to pull it too tight. So there, we still have a decent corner. If you pull it too tight, it all just starts to shrink in on you. You can stretch it back out. And now we're going to go down. Now I came through this little loop right here, so I don't want to go back through there. I'm going to go over that and go through a different loop and work my way down. And then you're going to go back in the opposite direction, down a different path. Just weave in. And then you can't even really see that I weaved anything through there. Everything still looks as I just crocheted it. So it's not going to look funky if you weave it through your stitches. Everything still looks nice. And then you would cut right there. And now it has disappeared. Alright, so this is where your slip knot was. So we have the bottom tail that we have to sew in. You would do that exactly the same as you did on the top. And there you go. That is how you single crochet, start your project, and finish your project. If you wanted to make a simple scarf, you could just keep going and going and going and going until this was a scarf and it was the length that you wanted. But for video number 3, which is going to be posted right there, we're going to move on to half double crochet.